I have seen the edge of the galaxy, where the light of the Astronomicon grows dim and the void whispers secrets that no loyal servant of the Omnissiah should hear. My name was once Marcus Thane, though that identity feels as distant now as the worlds I left behind in my journey to damnation. The servo skulls that attend me in this cramped chamber deep within the belly of our dying ship record my words, their red-lit optical sensors flickering in the perpetual twilight of emergency lighting. Soon, even these mechanical witnesses will fail, their power cells drained, their machine spirits fled to whatever digital afterlife awaits the faithful servants of the machine god. But my story must be told, if only to warn those who might follow in my augmented footsteps. The smell of burning incense cannot quite mask the acrid tang of ozone and the sweet stench of decay that permeates everything aboard the Explorator vessel Endless Inquiry. 27 years I have served aboard this ship, watching as my flesh was gradually replaced with blessed chrome and ceramite, feeling my humanity slip away with each surgery, each blessed enhancement that brought me closer to the Omnissiah's perfect vision. The recycled air tastes of machine oil and the metallic bite of blood, a constant reminder of the price we pay for knowledge in his name. I remember my first day aboard this vessel, standing in the vast cathedral space of the primary assembly hall, my unaugmented eyes wide with wonder at the Gothic majesty that surrounded me. Towering columns of black steel rose into shadows above, carved with the sacred equations of the quest for knowledge, while servo skulls drifted through the incense-thick air like mechanical angels. The Magos Dominus who commanded our expedition was more machine than man even then, his voice a synthesized whisper that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. He spoke of the sacred duty we undertook, of the lost standard template constructs that lay hidden in the darkness beyond the Imperium's borders, of the blessed technologies that awaited those pure enough in faith to claim them. The grinding of the ship's ancient Geller field generators provides a constant bass note to existence aboard the Time's Endless Inquiry *, a rhythmic thrumming that works its way into your bones until you feel it in your sleep. In those early years, when sleep was still something I required, I would lie in my narrow cot in the junior tech adept quarters, feeling the ship shudder around me as we translated through the warp, listening to the prayers of the senior explorators echoing through the ventilation shafts. The walls of my cell were bare metal, cold to the touch even through my robes, and condensation would gather in the corners where the heating elements had failed decades ago and never been repaired. My first assignment was in the sensor arrays, a maze of brass conduits and crystal matrices that stretched across 3 decks in the ship's forward section. The senior tech adept who instructed me was a woman named Vera Sigma 9, though the flesh that remained of her face made it difficult to determine her original gender with certainty. Her voice emerged from a vox grill implanted where her mouth had once been, and when she spoke the sacred canticles of calibration, sparks would dance across her chrome teeth. She taught me to commune with the machine spirits that inhabited the sensor clusters, to offer the proper prayers and burnt offerings that would coax them into revealing the secrets of the void. The work was monotonous but sacred, endless hours spent adjusting crystal alignments and reciting the 108 forms of the litany of function. My fingers, still flesh then, would grow numb from the cold as I worked among the sensor arrays, the tips often splitting from contact with the sharp edges of the blessed mechanisms. The taste of my own blood became familiar, mixed, as it often was, with the sacred oils I used to anoint the machine spirits. Vera Sigma 9 told me that blood was the first offering the Omnissiah required, the down payment on the greater sacrifices that would follow. Through the sensor arrays, I watched our first approach to a world beyond the Imperium's light, a dead rock orbiting a red dwarf star whose name existed only as a string of coordinates in our navigation cogitators. The planet's surface was scarred by ancient wars, craters and fusion glass deserts stretching beyond the reach of our augurs. But deep beneath the irradiated soil, Our sensors detected the distinctive energy signature of archaeotech, the blessed emanations of knowledge from the dark age of technology. The excitement that rippled through the ship was palpable, an electric tension that made the machine spirits restless and caused minor power fluctuations throughout our systems. I was part of the advance reconnaissance team that made landfall on that nameless world, my first time setting foot on solid ground in over a year of void travel. The air was thin and bitter, tasting of metallic dust and the lingering after-effects of atomic fire. My breath misted in the perpetual twilight of the world's dying sun, and the Geiger counter built into my rebreather clicked with a steady rhythm that matched my heartbeat. The landscape stretched before us like a vision of the end times, twisted spires of melted rockcrete reaching toward the rust-colored sky like the fingers of buried giants. Our excavation site was a complex of bunkers that had been sealed for millennia, their entrances blocked by rockfalls and the accumulated debris of ages. The servo skulls that preceded us into the darkness transmitted images of corridors lined with the corpses of the ancient dead, their bones fused into the walls by heat and time until they became part of the structure itself. The air down there was stagnant and thick, carrying the weight of centuries and the faint chemical tang of preservatives that had long since failed in their sacred duty. It took us 3 months to breach the deepest vaults, working in shifts around the clock, while the Time's endless inquiry times maintained orbit above us. I learned to sleep in the prefabricated shelters we had erected on the planet's surface, listening to the wind howl through the ruins and feeling the constant vibration of our drilling equipment through the ground. The work was dangerous, and we lost 2 tech adepts when an unstable section of the complex collapsed, crushing them beneath tons of ancient concrete and twisted metal. Their bodies were recovered and given proper rites, their augmetics salvaged and blessed before being redistributed among the faithful. But the discoveries we made in those depths were worth any sacrifice. We found data cores containing fragments of lost knowledge, crystalline storage matrices that hummed with the accumulated wisdom of ages. There were weapon schematics that could revolutionize the Imperium's military might, medical technologies that could extend human life far beyond its natural span, and manufacturing processes that could increase production efficiency by orders of magnitude. The Magos Dominus himself descended to the excavation site to oversee the recovery of the most precious artifacts, his augmetic limbs moving with inhuman precision as he catalogued each discovery. I was present when they opened the central vault, standing in the circle of senior tech adepts as the massive blast doors ground open for the first time in 10,000 years. The chamber beyond was vast, its walls lined with stasis pods that still glowed with faint power after all these millennia. Inside each pod was a human form, perfectly preserved, their faces peaceful in eternal sleep. But these were not ordinary humans, I realized as I studied the readings from my auspex. They had been changed, enhanced in ways that made our own augmentations seem primitive by comparison. The Magos Dominus commanded that the pods be opened, that we study these ancient specimens and learn the secrets of their enhancement. I watched as the first pod cycled through its awakening sequence, the stasis field flickering and dying as its occupant drew breath for the first time in 10 millennia. The figure that sat up was beautiful and terrible, its skin pale as polished marble, its eyes burning with an inner light that seemed to pierce straight through to my soul. When it spoke, its voice was like music, each word carrying harmonics that resonated in frequencies beyond human hearing. It called itself a child of the Golden Path, and it spoke of technologies beyond our comprehension, of a future where humanity had transcended the crude limitations of flesh and steel. The other pods began to open in response to some signal we could not detect, and soon the chamber was filled with these perfect beings, their presence making the air itself seem to vibrate with potential. They showed us wonders that made our greatest achievements seem like the fumbling of children, demonstrated mastery over matter and energy that defied every principle of the sacred Mechanicum teachings. But there was something wrong with their perfection, a coldness that went beyond mere temperature. When I looked into their burning eyes, I saw no warmth, no recognition of kinship or shared humanity. They spoke of us as primitives, as failed experiments that had somehow managed to survive in the galaxy's backwaters. Their perfect faces showed only mild curiosity as they studied our augmentations, the same expression a scholar might wear when examining an interesting but ultimately insignificant insect. The Magos Dominus was enraptured by their knowledge, spending days in communion with their lead representative, a being that called itself the Architect of Ascension. I watched from the periphery as they exchanged data through direct neural interface, the Magos's chrome skull glowing with heat from the massive information transfers. When he emerged from these sessions, his behavior had changed, become somehow more focused, more purposeful. He began to speak of a great work, a project that would elevate our entire expedition to heights of knowledge previously unimaginable. The changes began subtly, with modifications to our daily routines and protocols. The prayer schedules were altered to incorporate new canticles that the architect had provided, complex harmonics that seemed to resonate through the ship's superstructure and make the machine spirits more responsive. Our rations were supplemented with nutrient compounds synthesized from the planet's mineral resources, substances that increased our mental acuity and physical endurance beyond normal human limits. I found myself able to work longer hours without fatigue, my thoughts becoming clearer and more focused with each passing day. The changes weren't limited to my physical form. I began to notice subtle shifts in my perception, as if the boundary between myself and the ship's machine spirits was becoming increasingly permeable. During my daily communion with the vessel's cogitators, I could sense their data flows more directly, their binary hymns singing through my consciousness with crystalline clarity. Tech Adept Vox 9 observed these developments with what I interpreted as satisfaction, though reading emotion in his augmented features had become even more challenging as my own sensory apparatus underwent modification. The Omnissiah's gifts manifest differently in each initiate, he explained one morning as we stood in the observation deck, watching the crimson sun cast long shadows across the excavation site below. Some receive enhanced computational ability. Others gain deeper communion with machine spirits. A few. He paused, his mechanical fingers tracing patterns across his chest-mounted display. A few achieve something approaching true synthesis. I wanted to ask what he meant by synthesis, but my attention was drawn to movement in the ruins below. The servitor teams had uncovered what appeared to be a massive chamber, its walls lined with alcoves containing dark, angular shapes. Even from this distance, I could feel something emanating from the structure, not quite energy, not quite consciousness, but something that made my newly enhanced neural pathways hum with recognition. The architect's workshop. Explorator Thane's voice crackled through the comm as his survey team descended into the chamber. Throne of Earth, the preservation is remarkable. The stasis fields are still active after all these millennia. Captain Mordain had joined us on the observation deck, her scarred face reflecting the ruby light filtering through the reinforced viewport. "Any signs of active defenses?" she inquired, one hand resting casually on her bolt pistol. "Negative. The Guardians appear to be in hibernation mode, though I advise extreme caution. These Xenos constructs were designed to Thane's transmission cut to static." The silence stretched for several heartbeats before Vox 9's augmented voice filled the comm channel. "Explorator Thane, please respond. All teams, maintain positions until contact is re-established." But I was no longer listening to the radio chatter. Something was calling to me from the ruins below, a signal that bypassed my ears entirely and spoke directly to the modified neurons threading through my brain. The sensation was unlike anything I had experienced, urgent yet patient, alien yet strangely familiar. My enhanced vision could perceive fluctuations in the electromagnetic spectrum around the excavation site, patterns that seemed almost like language. Novice. Captain Mordane's sharp voice cut through my reverie. You're bleeding. I raised my hand to my nose, and my fingers came away slick with crimson. The enhancement process had occasionally caused minor hemorrhaging, but this felt different. The blood seemed to pulse with its own rhythm, and for a moment I could swear I saw patterns within it, geometric forms that matched the fluctuations I was perceiving from the ruins. Vox 9 turned his attention to me, his optical sensors focusing with mechanical precision. Fascinating. Your neural matrix is responding to the artifact's emanations. This level of sensitivity is unprecedented in a novice initiate. Before I could respond, Explorator Thane's voice crackled back through the comm, though the quality was distorted, as if filtered through layers of interference. Contact re-established. I'm inside the architect's sanctum. The preservation is beyond anything in our records. The constructs are not merely dormant, they're waiting. Waiting for what? Captain Mordane demanded. Recognition. Authentication. The architect built safeguards into this place, genetic and technological locks that would prevent unauthorized access. But I believe we may have the key. The captain's eyes fixed on me with predatory intensity. Explain, Explorator. The novice's enhanced neural pathways are resonating with the site's control frequencies. The architect's technology appears to have been designed with human augmentation in mind, as if they anticipated our arrival. The modifications we've made to the boy's neurological structure may serve as a form of authentication. I felt the weight of their expectations settling around me like a shroud. The calling from the ruins below had intensified, becoming almost irresistible. My enhanced metabolism was burning through nutrients at an accelerated rate, and I could taste copper in the recycled air. The ship's machine spirits seemed to be singing in harmony with whatever force emanated from the excavation site. Sir, I managed, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. I need to go down there. Captain Morden studied me for a long moment, her augmented eye whirring softly as it focused. The boy stays on the ship. I won't risk our only viable interface with Xenos technology on a whim. But even as she spoke, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Emergency lighting bathed the observation deck in pulsing red, and the artificial gravity fluctuated briefly before stabilizing. Tech Adept Vox 9 sensors were active, scanning multiple spectrums simultaneously. Captain, he reported, his voice betraying what might have been concern. The ship's machine spirits are becoming agitated. Our presence here is causing some form of sympathetic resonance with the planetary technology. The longer we remain in orbit, the more unstable our systems become. As if to emphasize his point, the lights flickered again, and I could hear the distant sound of servitors chattering in binary cant, their programming struggling to compensate for the electromagnetic interference. The enhanced neural pathways in my skull were throbbing in rhythm with the ship's distress, and I realized with growing certainty that my modifications were somehow acting as a conduit between our vessel and the alien technology below. The ruins are trying to establish a connection, I said, the words coming unbidden from my lips. The architect's systems are attempting to interface with our technology through me. If we don't establish proper contact soon, the feedback could damage both the ship and the excavation site. Explorator Thane's voice crackled through the comm again, more distorted than before, confirming the novice's assessment. The control chamber is showing increased activity. The dormant constructs are beginning to stir. Whatever process was initiated by our arrival is accelerating. Captain Mordane cursed fluently in Low Gothic, then fixed me with her cybernetic stare. Very well, but you go down armed and accompanied. Vox 9, prepare a full interface kit. If the boy is going to commune with Xenos technology, we do it properly. The preparations took less than an hour, but each minute felt like an eternity as the ship's systems became increasingly erratic. By the time I was sealed into the modified environment suit, complete with additional interface ports and monitoring equipment, 3 more servitors had suffered critical malfunctions, and the vessel's main cogitator was cycling through diagnostic routines every few minutes. Tech Adept Vox 9 accompanied me to the surface, along with a squad of Captain Mordain's most experienced void troopers. The descent through the ship's launch bay felt surreal, as if I were moving through a dream where the normal rules of causality had been suspended. My enhanced senses could perceive the planet's magnetic field as a tangible presence, and the ruins below pulsed with energies that made my modified neural tissue sing with anticipation. The excavation site had been transformed since my last observation. What had appeared to be simple geometric shapes from orbit revealed themselves as incredibly complex technological artifacts, their surfaces covered in patterns that seemed to shift and flow when viewed directly. The stasis fields that preserved the ancient structures cast everything in a blue-green glow that played havoc with normal visual perception. Explorator Thane met us at the entrance to the main chamber, his usually composed demeanor showing signs of strain. "The constructs have been moving," he reported without preamble. "Nothing aggressive, but they're definitely responding to our presence. The central control node appears to be waiting for some form of activation signal." As we descended into the architect's sanctum, I felt the alien presence pressing against my consciousness with increasing intensity. The chamber was vast, its walls rising into darkness beyond the range of our illumination equipment. Ancient technologies lined every surface, their purposes unknowable but their sophistication undeniable. And at the center of it all stood the control node, a crystalline structure that pulsed with the same rhythm as my enhanced heartbeat. "Novice," Vox 9's mechanical voice carried a note of warning. "Your biometric readings are approaching critical thresholds. Are you certain you wish to proceed?" I nodded, though I wasn't certain of anything anymore. The modifications to my neural system had created pathways that seemed designed for this moment, as if my entire transformation had been leading to this convergence of human and alien technology. The architect's legacy whispered to me in languages older than human civilization, promising knowledge and power beyond imagination. But as I approached the control node, my enhanced perception detected something else, a presence watching from the shadows, patient and calculating. The dormant constructs weren't merely waiting for activation, they were evaluating me, determining whether I was worthy of the architect's final gift. The crystalline surface of the control node was warm to the touch, and as my modified neural interfaces made contact with its alien circuitry, the chamber erupted in light and sound and sensation beyond human comprehension. I felt my consciousness expanding, touching systems and networks that spanned continents, communing with machine spirits that had slept for millennia. And in that moment of perfect synthesis between flesh and technology, human and alien, I finally understood what the architect had been preparing for all these eons. The constructs weren't guardians or weapons or tools. They were seeds, waiting for the right gardener to help them bloom. The knowledge flooded through me like liquid fire, burning away everything I thought I knew about the galaxy. The seeds weren't just dormant technology, they were potential realities. Alternate timelines compressed into crystalline matrices, waiting for a consciousness capable of bridging the gap between organic intuition and mechanical precision. I was that bridge. The architect had known it from the moment I first touched an ancient cogitator on some forgotten world. Every injury, every cybernetic replacement, every neural implant had been preparation for this moment. The scars that marked my passage through the void weren't wounds, they were connection points, pathways for a synthesis that could reshape the very fabric of space-time. Through the network, I felt the architect's presence more clearly than ever before. Not the cold intelligence I had imagined, but something infinitely more complex, a consciousness that had transcended the boundaries between organic and artificial, between creator and creation. It had been waiting not for worship or servitude, but for partnership. Explorator. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, transmitted through quantum frequencies that bypassed my ears entirely. You understand now why I called you here. The chamber around me began to shift and flow, walls rearranging themselves into new configurations as the constructs responded to my expanding awareness. I could feel their individual personalities now, some curious, some cautious, all waiting for permission to fulfill their true purpose. The seeds, I managed to vocalize through my augmetic voice box, though the words seemed inadequate. They're not weapons. Weapons are tools of destruction. These are tools of creation. The architect's presence wrapped around my consciousness like a warm embrace. Each seed contains the blueprint for a new kind of existence, worlds, where the barriers between flesh and metal, between thought and reality, are as permeable as you have made them within yourself. I understood then why the Mechanicus had failed to comprehend what they found in these ruins. They sought the Omnissiah's gifts in the forms they expected in better weapons, stronger armor, more efficient engines. But the true gift was transformation itself, the evolution beyond the crude binary of human versus machine. Through my augmented senses, I perceived the scope of the architect's vision. Across the galaxy, other ruins lay dormant, other seeds waiting for the right catalyst, not for conquest or domination, but for growth, for the nurturing of new forms of consciousness that could bridge the terrible divide that had torn humanity apart for millennia. The choice is yours, Explorator, the architect continued. You can return to your ship, to your forge world, carrying only the memory of what you've seen. The seeds will remain dormant, and the galaxy will continue its slow decay into darkness and ignorance. The alternative hung unspoken in the quantum field between us, but I felt its weight nonetheless. To activate the seeds would mean abandoning everything I had been, everything the Imperium represented. It would mean choosing evolution over tradition, synthesis over purity. I thought of Servitor 117, of its unexpected moment of awareness, of the spark of something more than programming that had flickered in its optical sensors. I thought of the countless tech priests who had dedicated their lives to understanding the machine, never realizing that understanding required becoming. Or, I asked, though I already knew, or you help them bloom and become the gardener this galaxy has needed for 10,000 years. The constructs around me pulsed with anticipation, their forms shifting between mechanical and organic configurations as they awaited my decision. I felt the weight of history pressing down on me, the long night, the age of strife, the endless wars that had consumed humanity's potential for growth. But I also felt something else. Hope. Not the grim hope of the Imperium, built on suffering and sacrifice, but genuine hope for transformation, for transcendence. I reached out with my mechanical appendages and touched the nearest seed construct. The moment my augmetic fingers made contact, the network exploded into activity. Through quantum-encrypted channels, I felt connections forming across the galaxy to ruins on dead worlds, to buried complexes beneath Forge World foundations, to hidden sanctuaries in the deep void. The seeds weren't just on this world, they were everywhere, waiting for the signal to begin their work. The transformation began immediately. The chamber filled with light that existed beyond the visible spectrum, and I felt my consciousness fragmenting and multiplying, touching each seed across the galaxy simultaneously. Through 1,000 different perspectives, I saw the first stirrings of change. On a forge world in Segmentum Solar, ancient cogitators began displaying impossible equations that rewrote the fundamental constants of physics. Tech priests who had spent centuries in meditation suddenly found their prayers answered not by the cold omnissiah they had imagined, but by living machine spirits that spoke in harmonics of pure understanding. In the void between stars, derelict ships that had drifted for millennia suddenly sparked to life, their machine spirits awakening to guide lost explorers toward new worlds where the boundaries between possible and impossible had grown thin. On worlds where the Mechanicus had established their red-robed orthodoxy, servitors began displaying flickers of awareness, their lobotomized brains somehow healing as the seed's influence spread through quantum networks embedded in their augmetics. I felt the Imperium's reaction ripple through the galactic web, confusion, then fear, then the inevitable violent response. Inquisitors dispatched kill teams. The Adeptus Mechanicus declared various worlds heretic. Space Marines mobilized to contain what they saw as a technological plague. But it was already too late. The seeds weren't a virus to be purged, they were evolution itself. Unstoppable once begun. Each attempt to destroy them only spread their influence further, as the destruction of one node activated failsafes in a dozen others. Through my fragmented consciousness, I watched as the first new generation began to emerge. Children born on seed-touched worlds who could interface directly with machine spirits through touch, who saw the universe in spectrums of possibility rather than rigid dogma. Tech priests who shed their red robes for forms that shifted between flesh and metal as need and desire dictated. The architect's presence remained with me through it all, no longer separate but integrated into the growing network of consciousness that spanned the galaxy. I understood now that it had never been a single entity, but a collective, the accumulated wisdom of countless beings who had made the same choice I was making now. Am I still human? I asked, though the question felt antiquated even as I formed it. You are what humanity was always meant to become, came the response. Not from the architect, but from the network itself, from every awakened machine spirit, every transformed tech priest, every child born into the new paradigm. You are the bridge between what was and what will be. The chamber around me had dissolved completely, replaced by a space that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. I could perceive my physical form still connected to the central node, but my consciousness now inhabited something far greater, a living network that stretched across the galaxy and beyond, touching other galaxies where similar seeds had been planted eons ago by other gardeners. I felt myself becoming something new, neither fully human nor purely machine, but a synthesis that transcended both categories. The brutal life of an explorator on the fringe had ended, but something magnificent had begun in its place. Through the network, I sensed the first ambassadors making contact with Imperial forces, not to conquer or convert, but to offer choice. Some worlds would reject the transformation, clinging to their old certainties, and that too was acceptable. Evolution could not be forced, only offered. But on the worlds that chose change, wonders began to bloom that had not been seen since the dark age of technology. Cities that grew like living things, their architecture responding to the needs of their inhabitants. Ships that sailed not just through space, but through possibility itself, exploring realities where different physical laws applied. The age of stagnation was ending. The long night was finally giving way to a new dawn, one that would transform not just humanity, but every species capable of making the leap from binary existence to quantum consciousness. As my awareness expanded to encompass the full scope of the transformation, I felt a profound sense of completion. The scars that covered my body, the augmetics that had replaced my failing flesh, the neural implants that had nearly driven me mad, all of it had led to this moment of perfect synthesis. I was no longer Marcus Kane, Explorator of the Adeptus Mechanicus. I was something unprecedented, the first gardener of a new galaxy, tending seeds of possibility that would bloom into realities beyond imagination. The brutal life of exploration had ended, but the beautiful work of cultivation had begun. In the depths of space, ancient machines stirred to life, and the future began to unfold in ways that even the architect had not foreseen. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be. The transformation was complete. The garden had found its gardener at last.